JP poll has dropped. We got a fresh JP poll. The paper is still warm. Week 11 here. These are not playoff rankings. And Cannell just got subtle. He wouldn't tag me directly. I am talking to Daniel Jeremetrius Cannell when I say this stuff right here is not meant in any shape, form, or fashion to indicate how I think the playoff rankings should be. This is not how I would rank teams if I were an AP voter. So nothing, point blank about this has to do with how I think you should be ranked when the playoff rankings are revealed. This is how I would stack your teams in terms of neutral field favorability. That's how a 3-loss team could be ahead of an undefeated team. Why, Josh? Well, because that 3-loss team would be favored according to the model and probably FanDuel. With that in mind, and knowing I'll have to state that at least 50 more times tonight, let's take a look at it, Colin. Number 1 through 5. Oregon is the number 1 team in the country. Ohio State is number 2. And Georgia has very slightly fallen to number 3. Not a big drop. It was like a half a point drop. Texas is number 4. And I have just decided to let the model do what the model wants to do. I have put Notre Dame where the model has it, or them. Notre Dame is 5th. Now, I don't think Notre Dame is the 5th best team in the country, but the model does. And the model also wants you to know there is only a 6-point gap between Oregon and Notre Dame. I think you all understand, if we put Oregon versus Notre Dame on a neutral field tomorrow and hung Oregon -6, it would cross 7 immediately. I think most people believe that. Now, how it played out, that's anyone's guess. But the market would not allow Oregon -6 to remain for more than 2 nanoseconds. But the model thinks that's accurate. So you know what? It wanted to put Clemson 5th last week. How'd that turn out? You hear me? How'd that turn out? So maybe the model needs to learn a lesson here. Ole Miss is number 6. Big detachment from the AP poll. Even big detachment from FanDuel. When I back channel with FanDuel, this is one of the teams that we disagree on the most. So these are not FanDuel numbers. This is the model's numbers. Most of the time FanDuel could back us up, but FanDuel would not favor Ole Miss over Alabama on a neutral field right now, but the model would by like a quarter of a point, but the model would. Miami's there at 7th between Ole Miss and Alabama. Slightly lower on Miami than the AP is. Not a ton. It's a negligible difference. Bama's at 8th. They're shaky at 8. All these teams 5 through 10 are shaky. There are flaws with all of them, obviously. Bama is 7 points off of their season high power rating. 7 points, not 7 spots. Penn State, they didn't fall much. They fell to 9 because we didn't have them as high as the AP to begin with, so we got kind of what we expected to get out of that game. But here's the biggest story of this entire thing. Indiana is 10th. Now, if you've watched this long enough, if you follow the JP poll logic and methodology long enough, you know there's some hot upstart team every year that's got a pretty weak strength of schedule, and they go on a run, and they win a bunch of games, and they're undefeated this late in the year, and the AP has them in the top 10, but we're not doing what the AP does, so we've got them down in like the low 20s to 30s. The JP poll and the model that corresponds with it actually thinks Indiana is every bit as legit as their record indicates. Not only have they been beating teams, they've been bludgeoning teams. And at this point, it really doesn't matter what they should or shouldn't be doing. Everything about them is valid. There's not fraud alert detected with Indiana. So JP poll's got them 10th. Never in my wildest dreams would I have guessed that. Tennessee's 11. Kind of like Bama, though, Tennessee's also 7 points from their season high. So there's been a lot of adjustment as some of these teams have struggled offensively. LSU's at 12. Louisville is up 14 spots or 15 spots to number 13. They jumped 4 3/4 points after last week. Huge adjustment on Louisville. I'm ashamed that we ever had them as low as we did, but we have corrected ourselves. The fraud alert did go off on Clemson. Clemson's down 9 spots. They're number 14 in the country. Now, remember what we're doing here. We are doing neutral field favorability. So if you argue Clemson should drop any further, you're arguing that they would be a point spread underdog against SMU, for example. Clemson would not be a point spread underdog neutral field against SMU. They just wouldn't. So it doesn't matter what their resume says or what you think they deserve. This is where they are. SMU, as I said, is 15th, up 5 spots. Really, really good job by Rhett Lashley this year. Iowa State, Not a ton of adjustment. They just fell 2 spots because we didn't have them as high as the AP had them to begin with. A&M's down to 17. South Carolina has surged. They are now number 18 in the country. It's a good team. 3-point loss to LSU, 2-point loss to Alabama, and they lost to Ole Miss. Though they have lost to the number 6 team, the number 8 team, and the number 12 team. That's their losses, and 2 of those were by combined 5 points. Let's see, Iowa is at number 20. So Brigham Young's at 19, Iowa is at 20, and then we get to 21 through 25. Colorado jumped 3 spots even though they didn't play. That's because a bunch of teams above them fell. Boise's still at 22, holding pretty steady. Southern Cal is 23rd. I want to talk to you about them. I know a lot of people will talk about why Southern Cal's still there even though they've lost 5 games or whatever. They've lost 5 games close, and this is not an AP ballot. If it was an AP ballot, I wouldn't have them ranked. If it was a college football playoff committee meeting, I would not lobby to have USC in the top 25. This is about who they'd be favored against. USC would be favored on a neutral field if they play Kansas State tomorrow. USC would be favored if they played Pitt tomorrow. Pitt's not even in my top 25. Like, you want to understand how irrelevant record is, put USC and Pitt on a neutral field. Ask FanDuel who'd be favored. You honestly think Pitt would be laying points? Even though they're just a 1-loss team, though, Josh, come on now. 1 loss versus 5 losses, don't care. If you're interested in that, I want to introduce you to the College Football Playoff Committee rankings. I want to introduce you to the AP. That's for you. This is not necessarily for you. Kansas State plummeted to 24. Florida's down to 25. That is with Lagway. If he's not playing, it's a different profile. They're not a top 25 team. But if he is, I think you guys saw last week, they pushed Georgia hard. They pushed them very hard. We weren't shocked by that. We picked them to cover because we thought they were a top 20 caliber team still. And if that came as a surprise to you, I think it's because people worship record too much. And that's not how this sport works all the time.